Jaime Dunaway-Seale, welcome to the conversation today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Texas. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about how bad bosses are destroying employee happiness and what we can do about it. It's always fun to kind of gripe and grumble about those bad bosses, but we don't want to stop there. We want to also share some ideas on what we can do with the toxicity and the challenges that we face when bad bosses are kind of ruining everything for everybody. So that's what we're going to be discussing together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Jaime's bio with everybody. Jaime Dunaway-Seale is a content writer at Clever Real Estate, the leading real estate education platform for home buyers, sellers, and investors. Prior to joining Clever, Jaime worked full-time as a journalist. Her writings about education, government, business, and sports have appeared in Slate, the Associated Press, Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and Advocate Media. Jaime graduated with a Master's of Arts in Journalism from the University of Missouri and a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and International Relations from the University of Arkansas. Again, a pleasure to have you. I should say to have you back. You joined us for a really wonderful conversation maybe 4 or so months ago. Today, a slightly different topic, but it's going to be a great conversation. Before we dive on in, anything else you would like to share with me or my audience about your background or your personal context?
No, I'm happy that you invited me back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. So the conversation today is based on a recent report. So tell us a little bit about the employee unhappiness survey and the data there. And then we can dig into really what it tells us about bad bosses and how it's really negatively impacting employees and the cultures within the workplace.
Right. So a few months ago, we talked about our Great Resignation survey about, people leaving the workplace, but we really wanted to dig in about why people were leaving, not just when and how they left, but the reasons behind it. So we came up with this survey and we found that bad bosses were the primary driver of people wanting to leave the workforce.
Very good. And it really can be. And I've done a lot of research in this space myself over the last couple of decades. And one of the biggest drivers for employee dissatisfaction, disengagement, and ultimately, turnover intention and in turnover is the relationships in the workplace, relationships generally. So your relationships with your coworkers, but in particular with your boss. Who do you report to and how is that relationship? And honestly, your job can kind of suck. Like you can have a lot of other negative aspects of your job and the organizational culture could be crummy. And there's lots of things that could be bad. But if you have an awesome boss or awesome people around you and your team, people tend to stick around, right? But the opposite is also true. You can have the most amazing organization in the world with all the bells and whistles and all the great things, but your boss is horrible and toxic and you just dread going to work every day. And guess what? Those people don't stick around. And it doesn't matter how wonderful everyone else is. That boss is going to be the driver of the exit for many people. And so I think that's a really great insight to share right out of the gate and just a good reminder for everyone. Now, I'll also say that I do believe that most bad bosses have the intention of being a good boss. Like, I don't think most people wake up in the morning thinking, how can I screw over my employees today? How can I be a big jerk? How can I, really just foster toxicity in the environment at work? Most people don't think that way. Most people, even if they did, wouldn't know how to do it, right? And so I think people have good intentions, and I think people want to be a good boss, yet we don't do the basics well consistently to be able to be a good boss. And so then that's where all the horror stories start to happen. Regardless of the best intentions, the impacts are negative, and then that drives people away.
Right. One of the things that we found in the study was, like you said, no one wakes up and is thinking about how they can, screw over their employees. Harassment, discrimination, all those things are pretty far down on the list of reasons that we found that employees are frustrated with their bosses. A lot of the most common frustrations were things just like lack of communication, lack of follow through, just lack of engagement. And so, sometimes, it's just a matter of bosses need to, figure out how better to communicate with their employees, find out what their communication style is, find out how best to encourage them, because every employee is a little bit different. But also, like, as a leader, you are in a position where when you say that you're going to do something, you do need to follow through with that. And a lot of times, managers do have a lot of responsibilities. So sometimes things can fall through the cracks, or that they personally don't think it's a big deal, but to their employees, it really matters.
Yeah, and that is a really, really important point, because you ask most leaders about the importance of transparency, the importance of fairness and equity, the importance of developing good relationships with your people. Like, go down the list. Most leaders will say, yeah, that's super important. Yeah, that's something I spend time focusing on. That's something I try to do. Most leaders will say that. Like, these aren't concepts that are foreign to most people. There are some old school people that are like the tough love style, autocratic kinds of leaders. But I don't think that's, as common. I think most people recognize the need for all of those different kinds of competency areas and to devote some time to it. But it doesn't matter what we think about how we're doing in fostering relationships of trust. It doesn't matter what we think about, how likable I am as a boss, and people feel, I can say, you can come to me with your problems and be open and vulnerable. I can say those things. That doesn't mean that that's what my people actually think or feel or believe, right? And so it's all about having that regular open communication, that transparency, and regular opportunities to share the input that people have with you, and the resilience and the confidence, like the security, the self-security, to be able to hear the feedback that you're going to get from your people. And sometimes they're going to be off base. Sometimes they're going to say things that are kind of crazy, but you know what? You still need to hear them out, and you still need to be able to look for the nugget of gold within the pile of crap that they might be delivering to you, and look for the value and the feedback that they're offering, because there's always room for us to improve, and there's always room for us to fine tune the way we interact with our people.
Absolutely. One of the things that we found was that employees really dread performance reviews. But I think that can go both ways. Like, employees are being evaluated, and managers should too. It should be an opportunity for them to, give their boss feedback, or possibly their boss's boss, about how their manager is doing, in a way that is, confidential, but also coming from a place of being constructive criticism and not just employee griping.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about some of the worst types of situations and scenarios that you found that have emerged from the research, about how bad bosses are really destroying employee happiness. That's a big statement. That's a big claim, right? That they're destroying employee happiness. Unpack that a little bit for us, and tell us a little bit more about how that's happening.
Sure. Some of the most egregious things go back to communication, or the expectations that they have regarding communication, or like the lack thereof. So we found 2 in 3 employees are expected to answer after hours communication. And a lot of the times employees are expected to reply like on weekends, on holidays, on their paid time off. And so that to me is a little bit more egregious than just like an hour or two before or after work, especially now that so many people are working from home. Working hours are a little bit more flexible. So like I could see, people putting up with that, but on weekends, on paid time off, that should really be a time to just completely unplug, because that's really important for just work-life balance. And managers, although they expect their employees to respond like to their communication immediately, they don't feel the need to communicate with their employees, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing. Now, I've known leaders that are very aware of this, and they're attuned to it. And they would say, oh, I don't actually expect them to respond. Like, they're sending an email at 10 p.m. at night. I don't expect them to respond. Tomorrow's fine. Or I send it on the weekend. I don't expect them to respond till Monday. And they might even say that in the email. The problem is when you're when your boss sends you an email and you see that pop into your inbox, even if they say, oh, this can no rush, you can get to this, next week or whatever, guess what? Most people are going to feel pressure to stop what they're doing and go respond to the email or whatever the request is or whatever. And so you really, just again, despite good intentions that you might have, the boss may be just thinking, oh, I got 1,000 things. I just need to get off my plate. I'm thinking about it. I just want to move on. And so they try to move it on. And I totally get that. And I've done that too. But you have to recognize that when you're in a position of power and influence and authority over other people, regardless of what you say, they are going to feel like they have to respond in a certain way. And so recognize that and just like utilize the save draft function, or like write your email and then send it, instead of 10 at night, send it at 8 a.m. the next morning, or instead of on Saturday, send it Monday morning. Like, you can do that. That's actually pretty easy to do. And so let's utilize those types of features rather than piling on to people. And then they, like you said, work-life balance, work-life integration gets totally shot. And that is a huge driver of dissatisfaction, disengagement, and, happy home life will influence and improve happy work life. And if your partner is always ticked off at you for taking work calls and work emails at all hours or during time off, guess what? That's going to negatively impact the company in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially for new employees or maybe young employees, their first job, maybe out of college. They are really going to want to impress their boss, and they may think that that's like working, long hours or responding to communication immediately. So that's something that I think managers need to keep in mind. And like you said, it is really easy to, like on Slack, you can schedule messages now. So write something on the weekend and then just schedule it to appear on Monday morning. It's super easy. And I think it's a great way for managers to respect employees' free time.
Yeah. Honor the lives of your people, treat them with dignity and respect. It's an obvious kind of low bar, but it's one of those things we just need to remind people of again and again and again. And, I see it too, like, again, well-intentioned leaders, where they, they're busy and they recognize that they're busy. And they probably recognize that their people are busy, but in their mind, they're thinking, but they're less busy than me and I'm the boss, right? And so they'll expect people to jump through their hoops and fit in with their schedule. And so, they won't respond. And I've been in situations where, someone, like a boss will send me something and say, this is urgent. I need you to work on this. And I'm like, okay. So I drop everything. I start working on this thing, but guess what? Along the way, there's some core questions that need to be answered. And so then I send back communication to the boss trying to say, okay, well, what about this? What do you think about this? And those sorts of things. And then there's never any response, right? And so then I'm stuck and I'm feeling like there's urgency and I need to respond, but they're not responding. And so it doesn't often go both ways. I also have seen it, I think most people can probably relate. This is not good practice as a leader, but you're busy, you have your schedule, you lay out your schedule, you have meetings and whatnot, but then your boss, last minute calls a meeting and that totally disrupts your whole day or your week, and so, it's happened to me before where I've had, I have a full slate of like 6 meetings throughout the day. And now like a day or two, and they've been scheduled for a month, weeks, maybe multiple months. And then the person I report to will come in and say like the day before, 2 days before, hey, everyone, urgent, drop what you're doing. We need the morning and we're going to do a 3-hour meeting on Wednesday or whatever. Right. And now you're just expected to drop everything and respond to whatever they say. And sometimes that urgency is real. And sometimes you actually do need to drop everything. But my experience has been most of the time, it's not actually as urgent as what they're saying. They just don't have much consideration for everyone else's time. And they just think what they're doing is much more important than what everyone else is doing. And that's one of the best ways to really tick people off and to foster distrust and dissatisfaction between a boss and their people.
Right. And I think to talk about meetings is really interesting because that's one of the things that we asked about in our study is like, how long are you in meetings? And we found that 1 in 3 employees spend more than 4 hours a day in meetings. And that's a lot of time. So I think something that managers can be aware of is just like, does this meeting really need to be an hour? Can we shorten it to 30 minutes? Or can we do some sort of like async check-in on how you're doing? And this is a great way to give employees like more time to like actually get their work done. And it's just exhausting being on Zoom. If you're in a remote environment, being on Zoom that long, and just, even in-person meetings can be a lot. So one thing that we do at my company is we have, at least on my team, we have focus days where like we purposefully don't schedule any meetings on Wednesdays, just to give everyone time to really dig into work that needs a lot of attention. And that's something that everyone on our team has found really beneficial.
Yeah, I love focus days, or even just focus half days or focus 2 hours. like this time is sacred. Do not schedule anything during this time and just let people do the work that they need to do and be able to sit with the challenges they're facing and spend the focus time. You need time to be able to get into a flow state, to be able to be your most productive. Most people can't just turn that on and off. And if you're jumping from meeting to meeting and you only have an hour here or there, guess what? You're just not going to be that productive. That's just the way it is. So bad bosses, they abound. And again, it's not about intention. I don't think most people are malicious. There are jerks out there. There are people that, just they're crummy people. But I think those types of people are quite rare. But so what do we do about it though? If I'm an employee and I'm experiencing what I consider to be toxic leadership behaviors, bad boss environment and behaviors, what can I do about it? How can I address it? And also, if I'm the boss and I start to get that feedback from people that they don't like what I'm doing, how do I start to make some adjustments?
Right. I think one of the, possibly obvious but easiest first things to do is, if you have an HR rep, go to them. Obviously, I feel like you should maybe talk to your boss about your problems first instead of immediately going to HR. If you feel comfortable doing that, it might be an easier conversation if your frustration is like lack of communication or, really high expectations about what you can actually get done. For something like discrimination or harassment, that might be a conversation best left to a professional. But those are obviously the first, 2 steps, especially if you like other things about your job and would like to stay there. But, the Great Resignation is happening for a reason. People are looking for other opportunities, and a better manager might be one of them. So, if you feel really uncomfortable, it might be time to leave.
Yeah, and recognize the grass isn't always greener, but we also don't need to put up with toxicity. It's just like if you're in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, get out of there, right? You're probably not going to change someone who is constantly doing those types of negative things. But if your frustrations are lack of transparency, lack of communication, that the person's well-intentioned, that they're trying, that they're trying to grow and develop themselves. That's a big deal. And so work with them and help support them so they can improve, so that they have the energy and the time to be able to support you so you can improve, rather than just jumping ship. But anytime you find yourself in a really toxic environment, that's where the deck is just totally stacked against you. And particularly if you're dealing with any sort of actual discriminatory behaviors or abuse of any kind or exploitation, those are times where, it's time to really be looking elsewhere. And the nice thing is right now, the labor market, the way it is, that there are lots of opportunities, whether it's jumping to another company or, trying out the gig economy and hanging up your own shingle and doing your own thing. There's lots of opportunities for people. So I don't think we need to feel as stuck as perhaps maybe people felt in the past.
Yeah. And something too, if, it's really just not working with your manager, ask someone else in your company if you could like transfer to a different team, where you wouldn't be directly under that person. I think that's it's at least worth trying if you don't want to leave, and like other aspects of your job, you just have, some issues with your boss. But I think you bring up a good point too, that like, managers, sometimes they're new, sometimes they're still learning, and it is important to like, give them some grace. And if you have been at the company a long time, if you are a really experienced employee, like I'm sure that they would, appreciate a feedback, especially like you said, most people are genuine. They really want to grow in their own roles professionally, and they want feedback about how they're doing and how to improve.
Yeah, I truly believe that's true. Well, wonderful. And how about for that boss who, maybe you've had blinders on, maybe you've been a bit oblivious, you think you're doing really well, but then you start to get that feedback and you start to realize that, oh, maybe for the first time you've really taken in that feedback and recognize that maybe there's some things that it's beyond just, the learning curve. It's actually things that are actually quite negatively impacting people around you. What would you suggest as some of the first steps for me personally to go through as I'm trying to think through how I can develop myself?
Right. I think, just listening to your employees is like a big first step. Don't assume that you're doing everything right. If multiple people are coming to you with the same complaint, it's probably for a reason. Um, I think that most companies will probably have some sort of employee improvement plan, like talk with your, almost everyone has a manager, talk with your own boss about ways to improve, get on some sort of plan, maybe bring in someone to co-lead beside you for a while. I think all of those are options. But also just, I think employees respond pretty well to managers who don't pretend like they have it all together. And, just an apology would go a long way. And just like genuine effort that you're trying to like make changes. I think employees will see that and respond to that and respect that.
I do too. And it amazes me how few leaders feel like they can just like a basic apology, to just an acknowledgement, like, yeah, this, even the kind of half apology of just saying, this wasn't my intention, but I really truly am sorry that this happened and that it impacted you this way. Just being genuine about that is really important. And there's a variety of reasons why leaders don't do that. Sometimes they're concerned about legal liability issues if they admit fault. But what I find to be more often the issue is that they just feel like they have to puff out their chest and just demonstrate power, and they just need to be able to foster this image of infallibility almost, of that they have control and that they're doing things right. And if they admit to making mistakes, then there's cracks in that kind of image that they're trying to portray. The thing is, nobody buys that image. Like, no employee actually believes their boss is perfect or anywhere close to it. Nobody, people might be scared of their boss. And so if you use a fear-based tactic and, fear-based approach and how you manage your teams, that kind of, power control kind of a way of demeanor and of portraying yourself might be able to maintain that power and control. But in the modern workplace, with the types of teams that we have, where we need to empower our people, that kind of model of leadership just doesn't work. Nobody expects their boss to be perfect. Nobody expects their boss to always get it right. Everyone knows there's going to be mistakes. Nobody is thinking or buying it if you are trying to portray yourself as always right or on the right track. So just admit it. Just like have a psychologically safe environment where people can share their insights and where you can acknowledge, oh man, I messed that one up. Let's figure out what to learn from that. And now we can move forward. Just have that conversation with people. When you do that, it goes a really long way, that being genuine and vulnerable and giving other people to do the same. Well, Jamie, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I'm going to have to let you go here in just a moment, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with me and my audience how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone is welcome to send me an email at jamie.seale@movewithclever.com. You can also follow us on Twitter. Me personally, it's at Jamie_Dunaway. It's my maiden name. And then we also have at Clever Real Estate, at Real Estate Witch, which is our sister site that this study is published on. Yeah, I think we've hit most of the highlights. Just as a final word, I think that everyone just needs to be genuine, be honest, but critical in a constructive way. Realize that everyone has stressful periods at work, and the best way to do it is to work as a team and together. So it's really important to just treat everyone with respect and create an environment that everyone can really use their talents. Because if employees don't feel comfortable and valued, then they're not gonna work at their best.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage my audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Jamie and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.